A strong day it was. Excuse me. Should have, I don't remember if I did a video with it on. I think I did. If I didn't, I apologize. You'll see it again anyway. Mounted the transmission. Torqued all those down. No torque converter. I needed access. Went in and threaded all these in. I wound up using the washers, the new washers that came with the kit. I think I've got an example here. So all of these washers come with a, come on. You can see it on there. Anyway, it's a fiber on the front and back of a washer, of a very thin washer. And that's the purpose of that, is to seal that head against the pump body. And I wanted to get these flush mount, and these, if you recall, were slightly below the surface when they were tightened. Well, I used those metal washers with the fiber backing from the kit, and I put them on all of these, and they cupped, of course, when they went into the chamfer. I used a gasket. I reused the interior pump gasket on the exterior side. The pump gasket, the new pump gasket, is behind. I saved that gasket, and I think I might have shown that in a video earlier, but so that I'm sealed then. So if there is any seepage between the pump body and the bolts, it is captured. And the reality is, the only threaded holes, I did look at that. All these holes here, these three, are cast into the body of the pump, or of the transmission housing. I can't remember if that one is. I believe it probably is as well. And these are going into the ports down on the bottom. That one is too, yeah. So those might actually not be blind holes. I believe all these are blind holes. But in any regard, they're all on. They're torqued to specification, 15 foot-pounds. Just like any 5/16 bolt, I guess, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 22. This is in aluminum, not into steel. 22 is steel. You can see then that the head is, trying to focus on it, just beyond flush. You can get your fingernail on it. That's not going to be a problem at all with the torque converter. You can see I painted it. I believe that was in an earlier video. I'll tie it in with the rest of the transmission. Of course, I got some cleaning to do. Transmission is completely rebuilt, done, ready for install. And so at this point, now I can begin mock-up and bolt the lower housing on. The closeout is done. It's painted. Got to let her go 24 hours. You know how that spray bomb stuff works. What I did learn, though, is that I've got too much interference. I can't get the bolts in to the bottom of that closeout, that little closeout piece, which isn't really that big of a deal, because that'll have to be on anyway. So I will just bolt it on to that before all that marriage goes together, and probably leave these loose. Bring in the lower bell with that attached to the lower bell, and then introduce this down to the bell. If I got any interference, which I shouldn't have, because I made sure of that. Now the clearance on these holes is, these are 400 thousandths for a 375 bolt. You can even see there's, a hint of marking. Of course, some of that's paint, but I mean, because I got paint in the holes, but you can see some evidence of witness marks from the bolts, but that's okay. It's just tight clearance, but that registers, assures that registration along with the locating dowels. Yes, I know the locating dowels are probably enough. I'm just not opening those holes up. These I did have to open up a little bit, and those are on the lower bell. And interestingly enough, the lower bell doesn't line up perfectly with the bolt pattern. And, you know, it's 1953. Not that overly concerned. I'm grabbing onto the lower bell. The lower bell's mounted with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5/8 bolts. 7/16 bolts, sorry. 5/8 heads. 7/16 bolts. So, again, a strong day. All the videos related to the transmission, the rebuild, and the final mock-up, dialing in the total indicated center line, the total indicated run out. I don't know if I mentioned it, but 2,000s total indicated run out. Everything is well within factory specs, but I spent a lot of time doing it. So today's a strong day. Got about 14 hours in getting this put together. So proud of what's happened today, and it takes us to that next level. Mocking it up in the chassis. So have a good one. Hello, everybody. So what do we got going? Waiting on the engine parts. Everything's in cut at the fab shop with my supplier. He sent me a message today, a bunch of drawings that were completed and submitted over to the shop for cut, break, and I don't know if he's having them weld too, but that's good. So the schedule looks good for receiving the front and rear suspension assemblies so that I can begin getting those welded to the frame. That little plug there is a dipstick hole, and so what I wanted to do in the interim is clean the shop. So, you know, a little commercial here. So I got a lot of things cleaned up in here. A lot. So I'm happy about that. And so it becomes to odds and ends. What are the small things that I can do in the interim to get kind of the stuff out of the way? You know, instead of running into it, saying, oh shit, I forgot to. In this case, the transmission dipstick. Now I used the original dipstick that came with this 46RE, and it was fine, except for, of course, the shape is going to be different because it's going over a different bell housing where it came up and tapered in, turned and went up. I needed to go more vertical, get around the adapter plate, then around the bell housing, come around the bell housing, come up and sit right behind the cylinder head. Very cognizant of the fact that, don't know how close to the firewall I'm getting, but I do know if I get it close to the cylinder, as close as possible to the cylinder head, that's as far as I'm going to get. I mean, obviously I can come out the side and make it look wonky and all that, but I don't want to do that. I wanted to make it look as factory as possible. So what I did was I took the dipstick out and I began to reshape it. We should go over here. I began to reshape it using a bender, basic, what electricians use for conduit, but light pipe bending. And we can see that I, had an oopsie. So it didn't stop me, but I knew that I needed to shorten the tube anyway. And my original intent was to try to form it. The bottom is up here. There's the insert side of and right in this area is where I began to shape it. It started to turn at that point. And I was going to form it and then begin removing material from the top and actually straighten out that curve. But I'm glad that it kinked because, what I realized in that experiment, if you want to call it that, is that the material needs to be bent step bent slowly and carefully instead of one continuous bend. This material's a little more rigid than conduit. Probably doesn't have as much tin in it, and so the result is it's a little harder. So what I did is I sectioned that piece out of here, and the method in determining the length that I took out was how straight I want this run to be before it turns around the adapter plate, before it can turn around the adapter plate. So I established that, cut that amount out, and welded the tube back together. That junction is right behind this bracket. Also note, I forgot to mention that I cut all of the brackets off and ground the welds down to the surface of the tube so that they wouldn't interfere with any bending any direction I wanted to bend. I took one of the original brackets and reformed it here and welded it over the top of the seam. Of course, welded the seam up, ground it, and then welded this over the top of the seam just for additional rigidity. You can't inspect the weld from the inside, although I'm pretty confident I have 100% penetration because as I ground it, I looked for pinholes, touched it up with weld, all that kind of thing. It's still a thin material and you don't know how deep you've gone. So I welded it there to give it extra strength. I consciously cut it there because I was next to this bolt hole, the tube coming up right in here. And so I used that as a determination with it in the transmission. It's actually this bolt hole. But I determined that my cut would be right in this location with the tube in the transmission. Okay? Then I did some reshaping on the tube to get it to length. The next step was to determine the length of I could stick this in here and you'd see that it approximates the length of the tube, but if I measure on the center line there, I cut the length of the dipstick off of the handle end. And on the handle end, you can see there's a pressed deformation that expands the width on either side here. There's a hole right here, and then there's a notch right there. So I just had to copy those after I got the length off the tube. And if I lay them side by side, you can see I just took a punch, deformed the tube right there, drilled the hole, and cut the notch to get the T-handle and this handle assembly back onto the stick. Now, dipstick tubes are not mild, they're hardened. So drilling that hole, I went through about 3 or 4 where am I at here? 3 or 4 of these drill bits because I began to make an impression in it, added a lot of oil, but no matter what, this material is as hard as, if not just a little harder than the drill bit. So it was just basically scratching my way through. So then the result, the decision was to use one of these. Okay, so in my Dremel, and this, although the tips aren't like sharp like a drill bit, they're a little blunt, working at an angle and then plunging, and then at an angle and plunging, and working my way through, got me through. And ironically, that diameter was very easy to control if you took your time and you didn't put excessive pressure on. It took me a little while, but I got through and I was able to copy that hole. An important note is that the drill bit did give me an impression and a dimple, if you will. I made a dimple with a punch. The drill bit gave me a scratch mark, enough depth to control, to keep that Dremel bit from walking on me. So it worked out in the end, it worked out extremely well. So then I reassembled that, and this is now, I just painted this. Of course, it's got to be flat black, and it turned out really nice. It turned out really nice. So this will be ready for installation, and it's another piece of the puzzle that's completed before it goes. And I wish, you know, I painted it here like 10 minutes ago, so at some point I'll show you what it looks like in here. But basically comes straight up, ties in here, and then loops around. Just remember this bolt hole, the dowel pin bolt hole, ramps around, comes around right here, okay, follows up and stands up right behind the cylinder head on the passenger side of the center line of the cylinder head, probably about center line of the valve cover, if not a little on the high side. But you can imagine how that's going to look. Sits real nice on there. I am cognizant of the fact that firewall, I don't know how close I'm going to be to the firewall, but you know, if I have to make a modification in there, I will, because I want it to look factory. I don't want to have the dipstick, you know, kind of try to go around shit to skip the firewall. But because I don't know how low the engine is going to go, that I have to still make the cowl portion and the floor portion of that fill panel that goes in there, the floor. You know, it's very easy to take a piece of pipe and provide a relief for the dipstick or whatever, you know, to put a half round in the firewall, all that stuff. So I'm not too worried about it. I like the fact that it's a yellow dipstick, you know, trans fluid. I'd like to do that throughout the vehicle with the oil fill and power steering fluid, all that. I'd like to have the yellow caps like they are current. So we'll see as we progress what we can do. But if I can stay consistent with that, I just really like that OEM style to it. So anyway, it's coming along. The cylinder heads, just a quick reminder, are at the machine shop getting the valve job done. The suspension kit is coming in. Phase after, at least I get the cylinder heads back, and the suspension welded in, is to begin the engine mount, the mock-up for the engine mounts. You remember I built the engine side of the mounts. The mount kit that I'm using is the Speedway kit. Speedway branded kit, which is very common. This will be the first time I've used this, by the way, this type of kit. I've done several different types, typically OEM, and so I haven't used this, but based on the popularity and the comments, you know, you can do a lot of research now on this type of stuff because of the internet. But so this is the kit that will go in to here. So I'll have to weld my flanges on wherever they may be, and then this will bolt up that underneath like this, like that. So transmission mount, still have to play with that. Conceptually, the 46RE uses a right there it is. Uses this type where it mounts. It locates off of 3 points on the body of the transmission. And then mounts accordingly. I think that's an exhaust hanger. And this is probably where it mounts, but I'll have to go back and look at the truck. And I have to do that anyway because I am pulling the wiring harness out of the same truck this transmission went out of. And that in and of itself was a challenge because I went last week and found that the truck is still up It's a scrap yard and a pick and pull. And the truck is, they take a big, the forks on a big loader. They put it on top of some steel rails that are probably about as high as my lift is sitting right now. And then they drain the fluids out before they crush the cars. But it's also used, because I have a relationship with them, they just set it up there and I can go in, and my son and I went in and pulled this tranny out. But that was months ago, as you well know, and it's still sitting up there. So I was able to go over and get some photographs of the underneath, because I want to pull the engine speed sensor. I'm going to pull all the sensors, this distributor, everything. You know, I'll get new O2 sensors. I get several, probably all the sensors new, but I want to use them for the thread patterns and the mock-up and all that kind of thing as I get into the engine. But I've moved from one thought to the next, but the reality is that the truck is still there. All the components are still there. It's up on a lift. I can see it and identify with how the transmission mount works on it. So then I can get everything mocked up into here. So more to come.